Okay, well, thanks everybody that you're still here. And now we're going to continue with our examination of the restoration of the kingdom of David and Israel. So let's have a look at Acts chapter 15. It's a very interesting chapter here because it quotes the Old Testament, the Tanakh, but it quotes it a little bit differently to the way it reads in the Masoretic text in the Hebrew. It follows the Septuagint, and it's very interesting. And after they had held their peace, James, and I don't know where they get James from, because it's actually Yaakov. Yeah, I don't know how you get James out of Yaakov. It's quite an interesting one. Anyway, James answered, saying, Men and brethren, hearken unto me. Simeon hath declared how God at the first did visit the Gentiles, and to take out of them a people for his name. And to this agree the words of the prophets, as it is written. After this I will return and will build again the tabernacle of David, which is fallen down, and will build again the ruins thereof, and will set it up, that the residue of men might seek after the Lord, and all the Gentiles upon whom my name is called, saith the Lord, who doeth these things. Now, this is a quote from Amos 9, verses 11 and 12, and you're welcome to have a read of it in the Old Testament there, in the Tanakh. But Acts 15:17 says, residue of men. And one of the words for men in Hebrew is Adam. But while Amos 9:12 says, and it's quoting Amos 9:12, says remnant of Edom. And Edom is spelt like Adam, but it's got a vav in it. So it's interesting because the Jews say the church is Edom. So not only has God been gathering in the 10 lost tribes, he's been gathering in the nations, and he's been gathering in Jacob's brother Esau, a remnant of Esau. And not only has he been doing that over these last 2,000 years, but if you read Amos 9:12, it reads that they may possess the remnant of Edom, and all the heathen which are called by my name, saith the Lord that doeth this. Leman Yerishu et Sharit Edom, v'kol hagoyim asher nikra shemi aleihim ne'uma Adonai osei or Yahweh osei. So Edom is there's a remnant of Edom that's actually it calls on the name of the Lord. So not all of Edom is bad. And if you read the book of Judges, some of the judges were from Edom, if you trace their genealogy. So we need to understand, some people can be descended from certain bloodlines that have been trouble to Israel, but they're actually dear to the Lord. So one of the commandments in the Torah is to love the Edomite that sojourns amongst you. Caleb, according to one genealogy, he says he's the son of Hezron, which is from Judah, descendant of Judah. But in another genealogy it says he's a Kenizzite. And the only Kenez I find is actually in the genealogy of Esau. And we see a descendant of Caleb. So Caleb was a good man. It's he was grafted into Judah. He was a Gentile proselyte. But it wasn't a literal son of Judah that actually entered into the Holy Land with Joshua. It was an Edomite. So the Lord works in mysterious ways. And so we need to see that God looks on the heart. And he knew what was in Edom's heart. Edom, sadly, was not a man after God's own heart. But some of his descendants were. And Jacob was a man that wanted the blessing and wanted to know Yahweh, but not all of his descendants did. So the Lord knows those that are his. And God is gathering in over these last 2,000 years people not only from the house of Israel, not only from Judah, but from Edom and from all the nations, except one. I don't believe he's actually gathering them out of Amalek. But that's
out of where?
Out of Amalek. I don't believe that they come from Amalek. It says many are called. It doesn't say all are called. Few are chosen. So God is merciful and God is good. And He's been mercifully, in the time of Israel's absence from the land, He's been gathering in and building this entity called the church, or the congregation of Israel. It's Israelitish, but it's also in some ways separate from Israel. It's its own thing. That's why He's been creating it in darkness. Remember, Adam was made, and then he was made from the earth, but Eve wasn't made from the earth. Eve was made from Adam. And God put Adam into a deep sleep, a tardema, and He took from his side a rib and built his wife, Eve. And in a way, God's done that with the church. He's put Adam, which is Israel, to sleep. And He's taken this entity out of Adam. So it's the church is Israelitish, but it's also its own entity. And so He's been forming the church in a time of darkness, when Israel is sleeping in a deep sleep. Now Israel is beginning to wake up. And here we are, awakening to the Torah. So in a way, Eve, she's not formed completely yet, but Adam's beginning to stir. Israel is Adam. Remember the Israelites in Numbers chapter 2, they surrounded the tabernacle. And there were 3 tribes to the west and to the north and to the south and the east. And those were related to the 4 cherubim. And there was Ephraim in the west and Manasseh and Benjamin with him. And then there was Judah in the east and Issachar and Zebulun with him. There's the lion. On the other side is the bull, Ephraim, in the west. And in the middle is the tabernacle with Levi. Here we have a picture of the cross with the 4 quarters, the 4 corners representing the 4 cherubim, and Leviathan, or the serpent, in the centre. Yeshua on a pole, Yeshua on the cross, became a serpent. What was the serpent? It was the priest. Remember, Aaron puts his rod down, turns into a serpent. The word for rod is tribe as well. It's shevet or matai, staff, but it also means tribe. So we have types and shadows of what the church is. That we are that tabernacle spiritually. That's what He's been forming. So when God gave Moses the building plans for the physical tabernacle, He was actually giving him the blueprint of the heavenly hierarchy. And the church of the firstborn is higher than John the Baptist. It doth not yet appear what we shall be. It says that the church is the congregation is the pillar and ground of the truth. It doesn't say that about Israel. And I'm not knocking Israel. We're part of Israel. What I'm saying is that this thing that God has been building that we have not seen in its glory is still in formation. And when I'm talking about the church, I'm not talking about the Catholic Church or Christendom. I'm talking about the body of the Mashiach. The Mount Sinai is another picture of it. Israel was at the base of Mount Sinai. The priests went halfway up with the elders in Joshua, but Moses went all the way up. That's where we are seated with Christ in the heavenly places. That's where we are seated spiritually. So we're coming to a time when that building process of that spiritual tabernacle is coming to a close. And it's time to revive Israel. So we're living in a very special time. And in the church or the congregation in Jerusalem, there are people that were Israelites, but they're part of the church as well. There's a connection between the church and Israel itself, but there's also a sense where it's its own thing. If you read the New Testament, the scriptures are much more about heavenly things and spiritual reality. And the Old Testament alludes to it, but doesn't And it's all throughout the Old Testament, but it's not there directly. Though the building plans for the tabernacle are spiritual, but they're also physical as well. There's going to be a physical temple. That temple in Ezekiel 40, some Christians will say it's just spiritual. No, it's actually building plans for a physical temple. But it's also spiritual. The whole law is spiritual. It talks about the outer walls of the temple. It talks about in the English you'll say that the tenons, the boards were connected via the tenons to the other boards. But in the Hebrew it says the sisters held hands with their sisters. So the outer walls of the temple are related to the feminine. And they're related. So the whole temple building is anthropomorphic. It's a body of believers. It's the heavenly hierarchy. So God wasn't just giving Moses a picture of a physical building. He was saying, this is what I'm building in the heavens. And He's actually doing it with living stones. If you read about the temple that Solomon built, he built all the vessels in the clay ground between Sukkot and Zaratan. Sukkot is related to tabernacles, and Zaratan is the piercing of the serpent. So between those time periods, he's building these vessels, and they're built out of the clay ground, out of Adama, out of the ground. God is building this temple, the spiritual temple, out of the clay of Israel. It says in the Old Testament that in the Torah that the children of Israel brought all the articles to build the temple, the gold and the silver and the material. But it doesn't say that in the Hebrew. It says the men laid upon the women and they brought the articles to build the temple. Meaning sexual relation. The actual temple was built out of the genetic offspring of those people that were before Mount Sinai. So God is building the church of the firstborn out of Adam's side, out of the physical seed of Israel, but it's its own entity. Now that building process is drawing to a close, and we're going to be physically returning to the land of Israel at some stage. And with us a remnant of Edom shall return. This must mean that the regathering of Israel must occur before the tribulation. We read in Obadiah that Edom will be destroyed in the end because of his ancient hatred. But there's a remnant of Edom that are God's sons, that are returning with us, just like Caleb returned with the Israelites to conquer Canaan. So the future is a repetition of the past in some ways. We haven't seen the fulfillment of this verse here in Acts, where the residue of men might seek after the Lord, as it's recorded in Amos, where the remnant of Edom is in possession by the house of Israel after they return to the land. So the restoration of the tabernacle of David, and we're going to get into what that's all about shortly, and we're going to define that, is related to the regathering of Israel back to the land. So Acts chapter 15 is related to Joel, which is related to the outpouring of the Holy Spirit and Israel gathered in the land. I'm going to flesh this out a bit more and bring scriptures to people so you can get an understanding. This may sound all very theoretical, but the bottom line is that we're going to be returning to the land before the tribulation, and there may be a second regathering after it. But there's going to be a re-establishment of those things that have fallen down, including David's line, his kingly line, and the Levitical priesthood.